The Beartooth Mountains tower majestically over south-central Montana and northwest Wyoming. Along the Beartooth Front on the Montana side, in Carbon and Stillwater counties, the mountains provide source water for the 5 rivers that are the lifeblood of farms and ranches and small towns that dot the rocky countryside. The rivers also support huge wilderness areas and national forests, and a thriving population of wildlife, including grizzlies and black bears, bighorn sheep, elk, moose, and mountain lions. The still pristine rivers provide plentiful rainbow, brown, and cutthroat trout to the fly fishermen who find their way here. The area's rural lifestyle coexists in a hard-won peace with the mineral extraction industry, including one of the world's largest palladium and platinum mines and pockets of oil fields throughout the area. It is, as Montanans like to say, the last best place. Hank Lisher is a resident of Nye, Montana, and a retired law professor.
We are on the deck of my cabin in the Stillwater Valley in Stillwater County, Montana. I'm at the foot of the Beartooths. The Beartooth Mountain Range runs from roughly where I am. It actually runs farther to the west, but it runs over towards Red Lodge to Carbon County. Across this Beartooth front, we have an amazingly beautiful and well-preserved natural area.
Deb Thomas is a 4th-generation Beartooth Front native who has lived with 6 wells near her Clark, Wyoming home since 2000.
I've lived along the front for the majority of my life, so I have a real tie to this area, and I love this place where we live. It's a beautiful piece of property, but if I had known what I know now when we purchased this property, I don't think I would have purchased it.
Bonnie Martinell is an organic farmer in Belfry. Her farm is near a well permitted by the Montana Board of Oil and Gas.
We raise more gourmet end of the produce line, and we irrigate everything that comes out of the Clark's Fork River, which comes out of Yellowstone Park. We all live here because we want the quiet, we want to go about our lives quietly and peacefully, and we don't want to be bothered.
Dennis and Kathy Rickman Hoyam are residents of Nye. Kathy's great-grandfather homesteaded their ranch beginning in 1895. Their property is near an oil lease in Dean.
I can remember when I was about 10 coming to this spot. My grandfather had an old enough tractor that he could hay all of this, and I sat thinking, this is where I want to live when I grow up, and I feel very fortunate to be able to be here.
Bob and Mary Johnson are residents of Red Lodge. They retired here from a family farm near Tioga, North Dakota. They lived through the Bakken oil boom.
We're back to that nice small town feel of safetyness, of being safe, and I love that.
Just a few hundred miles to the east is Bakken Shale, which, since 2007, has fueled one of the largest oil booms in history. The boom has produced economic riches, but the growth has had its cost. Overcrowding, oil and chemical spills, air pollution, crime, and traffic have changed the area forever. To the south in Wyoming, oil and gas drilling throughout the Powder River Basin has brought mineral extraction into conflict with local residents. In October 2013, residents along the Beartooth Front were shocked when the CEO of Denver-based Energy Corporation of America announced that the company was going to bring the Bakken to the Beartooths and drill 50 wells in the area.
we are now facing the prospect of large-scale oil and gas activity. There have been a large number of mineral leases acquired in this area. The oil and gas industry is talking about opening up major activities here, creating a new Bakken, if you will. If we let that go as it's done in many places in the West, there's a huge threat to things that are very important to all of us. We need to get educated about what goes on with oil and gas activity. We need to understand the risks that are associated with oil and gas activities. And we need to be prepared to act to protect local property, local air, local water, and our way of life. These are huge stakes.
When Energy Corporation of America stood up and said they plan to bring the Bakken to our area, it really scared me. I'm only a mile and a half from the well that they had proposed.
It was the same thing that we heard here. It's going to be the next big play. We're going to, make all these jobs are going to come here, and all of this money's here to be made for the people who live here. And all I could think about was what we live with.
Mark Quarles is a geological engineer. He's done extensive research on Energy Corporation of America and their compliance record in other states.
In Pennsylvania, we looked from 2005 to 2014. They had 90 violations and 55 environmental enforcement actions against them. And in West Virginia, since 1989, they had 70 violations. These were significant violations that affected the environment, all right, such as synthetic pit liners that were torn, all right, so therefore they're leaking, right? The failure of the cement seal around the casings that allow vertical migration of natural gas. That, in fact, being the way aquifers are contaminated, is that vertical migration of gas and injected chemicals along the outside of the borehole into the aquifers. Failure to close wells that were no longer in use, and failure to properly remove pits. So the legacy of those type actions in Pennsylvania are serious. Perhaps that's a good predictor of what might happen in Montana.
Large-scale drilling activities have very far-reaching consequences. And if you wait to see what they bring, you may have lots of the adverse consequences already in your backyard.
We trucked all of our grain out ourselves, and there were many times when I could not move grain. The roads were too dangerous, for one thing, and it would have ruined my truck.
The reality is that the constant barrage of air emissions is, I would say, as damaging, maybe more damaging than the water contamination. And then you start recognizing the changes in your water, the leaks, the spills that happen, the truck traffic, the dust, the constant barrage of people coming in and out of your community that aren't a part of your community, the lights, the noise, the list goes on and on. Separator shacks explode, and the high winds takes things away.
Here's our beautiful little farm with trees, and it's just such a pretty place. But on both sides, about a mile in each direction, was just oil stuff. It was stinky, it was dusty. I could hear lots of machinery. I could hear people talking. At 2 a.m., I said to Bob, if we lived there now and we had small children, I would, and I'm not kidding, I would not let them out of my sight.
We had tanker after tanker going by, and we were in a complete cloud of dust. This high tunnel that we're standing next to was brand new, and it was totally covered in dust. My apples were covered in dust. I had to clean them when I picked them out of the orchard. The dust was so bad that we had people on tractors that almost got hit by tankers.
This neighbor here, he went from having 2 cars go by his farm a day to 1,000 trucks going by a day. 1,000 truck trips to get gravel. So that, even though this was his land, it certainly affects everybody around it.
In 2006, the well just up the hill from Deb Thomas's house blew.
They started seeing these blowholes all up here along the hillside where you see the monitor wells, like posts. They started seeing blowholes up here. They started seeing these like mud and condensate liquids spewing from the ground. When the Crosby blowout occurred, I had an asthmatic episode. I've never had asthma. I'd get huge rashes on my arms, and when I'm subject to emissions, when I'm exposed to emissions now. They're not paying for anything. They're not paying for any of the damage that they've done to our property. They're not paying for any of the loss of property that happens after you're living in an area that has this kind of development in it. And they certainly are not paying for any kind of medical care for you or your family that you may have now or that your kids are going to see down the road, because the exposures to them are far greater than they are to an adult.
In Montana, there's a saying, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting.
Water is a major issue. When I visit my children and taste water from, well, even Billings water doesn't taste good to me. Having this fresh water and thinking that something could happen to jeopardize that source is certainly an issue.
With the well drilling that is anticipated by many folks here, many, if not all of those wells will take typically 2 million gallons or more. There are nearly 600 different chemicals that could be used in the drilling of any single well.
We have an area here that we're only 12 miles from Elk Basin that has already done oil production, and we have flash floods that come through here, and there's already been 3 spills of that oil and chemicals that have come as far as 14 miles up to 17 miles down through here and has already contaminated this valley. We need to start treating our water like gold and start protecting it.
If oil is liquid gold, water would be liquid platinum. I don't think that I could put a real value on water.
We've got the 3 headwaters for 3 of the major ditches in this area. And those ditches, if they're contaminated, will carry that contamination for 22 miles. Because after the oil companies leave, the farms and ranches, if they're decimated, there is nothing. We only have one earth, and if we destroy it, it's gone.
If you learn tomorrow that it's now going to happen in your backyard, would you stay?
If it happened to that extent, to the extent of the Bakken,
I don't think so.
that would be a very difficult decision.
Federal legislation to protect clean air and clean water sound good, but there are very large exceptions for oil and gas activities. So you can't rely on federal legislation to protect yourself.
Geological engineer Mark Quarles provided expert testimony on the Belfry permit before the Montana Board of Oil and Gas.
There's really no setbacks at all in the Montana rules that protect the homeowner, occupied dwellings, distance from surface water, distance from wells. That's up at the local level and at the discretion of the oil drilling company, the mineral rights holder, and the local conservation district.
That's one of the things that I really feel the most betrayed by, is the lack of protection from our government.
One of the things that is of concern to many people are the chemicals that go down a drill hole, particularly with respect to fracking. And the industry has been very successful in saying we don't have to disclose what goes down the hole, and they claim it's proprietary information.
The Montana Board is not unique. Most states' Board of Oil and Gas are made up of representatives from within the oil and gas industry. And they're made up of mineral rights holders. And usually there is a single environmental-minded appointee. So just by the nature, boards most typically are made up of people who have an interest in drilling oil and gas wells for profit.
The Energy Corporation of America filed for a permit for this well. There was a large group of us from Carbon County that went to the Board of Oil and Gas and requested to be heard about our concerns with this well and the placement of the well. When we went to the Board of Oil and Gas to speak, we filed a request to speak and we were denied it. These farmers and ranchers are very respectful, hardworking, extremely intelligent people who showed up and gave the Board of Oil and Gas utter respect and were totally disrespected by the Board of Oil and Gas. These guys are paid by our tax dollars, and yet they didn't even have the decency to show us respect in return.
If you don't own all of your minerals and your surface, you cannot have any say about what happens on your surface, because the mineral owner is the estate that has preference. They're the dominant estate, and they have the right to develop their minerals. Even if you own 99% of the minerals, that 1% that somebody else owns, those people have the right to develop those minerals, and they have the right to use your surface to get those minerals out of the ground.
The law is tilted in favor of development. If you want to address that balance, to strike a more fair balance, you need to do it locally.
Our state of Montana has decided to not regulate or put in any stipulations whatsoever, but they have opened the door by leaving it up to the individual communities to establish regulations and limitations. Every local community needs to, first of all, figure out who's got the mineral rights, figure out what the laws are in their area, and then from there work with their officials to start changing those laws.
The state of Montana has a very limited number of field agents to go monitor the many wells in the state of Montana. If you're going to have effective monitoring, I think you need to do it at the local level by working with the county officials.
Why does it have to move so fast? What is it about this that makes it
This industry,
yeah,
somehow, yeah.
imperative to get things done now? What that speed does is it just annihilates infrastructure to those towns who cannot handle this because of the sheer number of people that are there. You know, and so for me, it looks like that unregulated speed is bad for communities.
I think it would be a grave mistake for anybody to wait before they took any action. In other words, don't wait until you see a drill rig next to your property. And there are things that you can do, one of which would be to research your mineral rights on your own property.
If you can educate yourself to the level that you know what may happen and what some of the risks are, then tell your neighbors, talk to your county officials, be prepared to act with your neighbors to try to do something to bring a fair balance that will protect your property rights, your water, your health, your clean air, your community, your way of life. There are things you can do. It will take a lot of effort, but if we act together as neighbors and property owners, there are some possibilities.